Hey everyone, welcome to another Lightning Pod. This is Alessio, partner and CTO at Decibel, and I'm joined by Swix, founder of Small AI.
Hey, and today is a long time coming. We have the epic return of Logan Kilpatrick, now from Google. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited. It feels like almost 2 years now or something like that since we last did an episode. So
yeah. Thanks for helping us kick off Latent Space, to be honest. I don't think people know or have looked back that far in the archives, but Latent Space has been one of the most successful things that Alessio or I have done, and you helped to kick that off for us. So thank you so much.
It was my first in-person podcast. So it was y'all's first podcast. Yes. It was the first. I'd done a bunch of virtual podcast recordings, but it was the first time I ever sat down and did a legitimate podcast. So special place in my heart that we got to do that together.
Yeah. Since then, it's gotten a lot harder to do any podcast with OpenAI. They've locked down their PR a lot. But thanks for jumping on. So you're now AI Studio lead, or how do you describe your role?
Yeah, I do a lot of things, and I think people still think that my job is DevRel. My job's not DevRel. I sort of made the official transition as I joined Google to a product role, and today I lead product for Google AI Studio. So really focus on how do we build the right product for developers? How do we build the best product for developers, specifically a AI developer platform? I still do a bunch of DevRel-y stuff just because it comes naturally to me, and I think it's honestly the way to be the best is go and talk to developers, which is a lot like DevRel. But yeah, working on that and bringing Gemini models to the world.
Yeah, let's. We're here to talk about it. Gemini 2, the sort of hottest, latest news. I think one of the interesting things that people are trying to figure out is the pricing strategy, where Pro is, and then what Flash Thinking is, and why there's Flash Lite now. How do you think about the product suite?
Yeah. So, some of these are sort of maybe we're in our own head too much with some of the decisioning on pricing and stuff like that. The sort of general principle is Flash, we really wanted to give developers the best model without sort of a significant price increase, but just because of a bunch of trade-offs for that model, the price had to go up. So it went from 7.5 cents per million tokens to 10 cents. The sort of way that this was offset was we used to distinguish, I don't know if folks are familiar with this, but we used to distinguish based on input price or input token volume. So it was over 120 AK tokens would be twice as much. So it was 15 cents. Now it's just 10 cents straight up, whether it's one token or a million tokens, which should hopefully make people's lives simpler. But as far as why Flash Lite exists, we sort of spent the last year leaning into this Flash narrative of, having the lowest cost model with the highest performance in the ecosystem. And it kind of just felt weird to have strung people along for this narrative and then changed the price point. I think a lot of people baked in this 7.5 cents into their mental model. And we wanted to Flash Lite was really we want to preserve this story that we've been telling developers, which is basically eliminate the economic burden to build with AI and be able to get a really great model for cheap. So that was the Flash Lite story. And then now with Pro, it's how do we push the frontier? And the exciting thing, and the Pro models always end up being more expensive, but the exciting thing is we keep seeing this jump where the capabilities of the Pro models get superseded by the Flash models as the next generation comes. So if you look at our 2.0 Flash model is actually on every dimension a stronger and better model than the previous one, and it's X cheaper or whatever it is than the previous Pro model. So I think that trend is going to continue, but we need to do the frontier research to continue to make the Pro models great and have the sort of cost benefit trickle down to the smaller size models.
Yeah, I think right now the meta game is really that the model labs have the big model. We don't know much about it except that I think now we know it's an MOE, and it's going to be as big as it can possibly be. And they're always the teacher models for the distillation artifact, which is the actual thing that you are supposed to use for production inference. I feel like there's maybe other variations of this where there's this distillation of the distillation, which is the Flash Lite. But I think it seems like there will always be this teacher model. The rumor is that Anthropic has Claude 3.5 Opus and is distilling for Sonnet, right? And Sonnet's the one that actually people use. I think it's an interesting pattern that we no longer encourage the big model in production because it's too slow, it's too expensive, whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been interesting. And I think we've had this conversation about an Ultra series model internally where it's what would the...
Well, yeah, where's Ultra?
Yeah, where is Ultra is the comment that developers have asked. And I think it's a good question. But there's just like a lot of practical bounds around like would something of that size and cost like actually make any sense in production? And I think the takeaway is like Flash is doing a great, like developers want better models. So we'll give developers better models, but Flash is really this like right trade-off and balance of all these things. And now we actually have the reasoning model. So it's like we have Flash thinking, which is a sort of skew sort of related to the 2.0 Flash model that can think and uses inference time compute in order to get better performance across a bunch of stuff like coding, math, science, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like that is more likely in the medium term going to be the thing that like continues to just like rapidly scale up relative to the other capabilities.
One question I had, what does the experimental keyword mean when it comes to Google models? Does it mean it might not be supported in the future? Does it mean it's just early? Like, how should developers think about it?
Yeah, we're trying to give ourselves the two sort of pieces to balance is like, on one hand, we want to ship models as fast as possible. Like the experimental model release train started as like with the idea of how do we eliminate the delta between like the model training process and the model that developers actually have. So it's like it's the super fast release valve to like get a model out the door into the hands of developers. Framing it as experimental is really to try to signal that like, one, you shouldn't use this thing in production. Like it's, rate limits are usually the limitation to stop people from doing this. But two, like the model might change. And in certain cases, like we come out with a new rev of the model, we literally just like hot swap the old one with the new version of it. Like there's no opportunity to stay on the old one. And this usually comes when like it's not really like an A/B test. It's like we are clearly hill climbing on something. Like there's still a lot of room to go. Let's do some experimental model launches to like validate that the gains that we're seeing internally like actually correlate to the gains that developers see on a bunch of use cases that they care about.
Yep. And then the other thing, people in our Discord were saying the model is cracked for code, which sounds great. I tried to use it with Cursor Composer, but Cursor doesn't support the reasoning models yet. Is this something that you work with Cursor on? Like, do you know if that's coming, kind of like what the limitations are? It feels like to me, for me, it's one of the main barriers to adopting these reasoning models for like most of my use cases coding. And like, if it doesn't work in composers, like it needs to be so much better to get out of it that it's usually not worth it. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll text Michael and Ahmad after this and we'll see if we can convince them to turn it on for Composer. I think we've been collaborating closely with them and making sure they get access to the latest models and all that stuff. I don't have the specific context on the situation with Composer, but I've played around with it a bunch and it's sick. So hopefully we can get the Gemini models in there.
It's funny. If it doesn't exist in Cursor, it doesn't exist to us.
I think that's fair. It's interesting, like how quickly that's become the case. Like Cursor has been just continues to absolutely crush it, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, they're the fastest growing SaaS in the history of SaaS, 1 million ARR to 100 million in 1 year. And, we were talking about how, we were the first in-person podcast that you did. We were also the first with Cursor, and just to see them grow so quickly beyond that. Obviously, we wish we invested and all that, but it's nice to at least have a long-term relationship with them. Yeah, let's talk about reasoning. A lot of people are very interested. Noam Shazier is back. What's he cooking?
Yeah, Noam and Jack are Jack Ray.
Jack who? Okay, who's that?
Jack Ray, yeah, he's been a long time DeepMind research scientist. Was previously a pre-training person. We actually overlapped at OpenAI together a little bit, and then is now back at DeepMind with Noam co-leading the reasoning effort. And really, the intent is like, it's now obviously clear to everyone that like you can scale up these reasoning models and like this is the new scaling frontier. I tweeted the other day that it feels like the GPT-2 era, the like order in which the time frame in which model progress can actually happen. If you look at our first reasoning model launch in December, less than 20 days or less than 30 days later, we had the second version of the reasoning model publicly available and other versions already internally available. And like the scaling is like directly up and to the right, which is exactly what you want to see. And it's incredible how quickly this is happening. And also like how quickly, all of those threads about just like how quickly people adapt to this new model capability. Like it's just like the obvious outcome now is that these models are going to keep scaling up, which is really funny to see at the same time of this narrative around, the models hitting a wall. Literally was like 2 months ago. 2 months ago, it was like the entire media narrative was like, there is no more value to be created with AI. It's hit the wall. This is the end of it. And in the last 2 months, it's like back to the pre-training era days of like, you can just infinitely scale up RL and then all of a sudden the models just keep getting better infinitely, which is obviously not is an exacerbated version of the narrative now, but it is what it sort of feels like to a certain extent.
Yeah, I kind of put it as like it's a different dimension of scaling. We did hit a wall, which is, the way I put it is no model larger than 2 trillion parameters has been shipped because we are no longer scaling parameter size, really. Like we're just scaling in inference time compute, and that's okay. But it's a different dimension.
I'm hopeful. I think my instinct is that pre-training will keep scaling. Like I think we're seeing a bunch of progress on pre-training stuff, which is super exciting. Like I think the best outcome for the world is pre-training keeps scaling. And like actually, if you look at the tangible examples of this, and I was having a conversation with Jack a few weeks ago and talking about sort of the interplay between scaling the core model capabilities in the base model itself and scaling this RL thinking stuff that's happening, and how important the interplay is between those. It's like you get this, like ultimately the base model, and this is why I think like not, at least today, like we don't have a separate series of thinking models. Like it's not Gemini, whatever, some other name. It's like truly the Gemini 2.0 flash models with thinking built into them. So you benefit from all of the like base capabilities of the model, and that ability for the model to reason over the tokens. You get like both ends of the scaling curve, which is like as the base model capabilities improve, you get that value. And then you also get the added sort of RL thinking chain of thought stuff that's happening, which is just super cool. And then the capabilities like multimodal and long context start to really matter a lot in those examples as well.
I mean, Google's long context, like 1 million, 2 million, crazy. Like it's wild.
Yeah, and like it feels like, again, like back to the thread around these capabilities, like it feels like long context with reasoning is like finally going to be that thing where like it actually just like blows the lid off of it, and like it makes the use case really come to life. Because like the challenge historically has been long context. If you read the original paper that we put out when long context landed, it was, the models are pretty good at like needle in a haystack like tasks of like attending to 1 or 2 things or a small number of things in the 1 million to 2 million token context window. But as you scale that up to like find me 100 things in this 2-hour video, it becomes really hard for the model to do that. And I think reasoning is the moment where this starts to change, where the model's actually able to go and look over that number of things in a single context window, which is really cool.
Yeah, I'll offer an anecdote, which is in science, but it's what we have, which is I'm pretty public about AI news and how I run essentially regression tests against every single frontier model every day. And the moment Gemini Flash came out, I ran it against Mini as well, and Gemini Flash is winning. It is so much better at context utilization in O3 Mini. It's actually like a bug in O3. Like I've told them about it and they're looking into it, but I'll endorse that Gemini Flash is like currently the best summarization and reporting model. I call this a reporting model because like I think people have this mental image of summarization as like we'll take a long document and trim it down to a few bullet points. But what reporting is as a separate problem is very, very long context, hundreds of thousands of context, all different news stories and all different ways of ranking and clustering them that Gemini is just way better at. And so on my sort of small benchmark, it's Gemini Flash is just incredible at context utilization. I don't have a better way of expressing this yet, but yeah, that's my feedback.
I feel like you should make this a public benchmark. I feel like everyone now has their own like external leaderboard / benchmark. And I actually feel like this would be like a really cool version of this where like I can go to your newsletter and like see the versions generated by all the different models, and like whoever the like let people vote on that. You have your own LM/Sys Arena leaderboard of like people voting on the best version of the newsletter on a given day would be super cool. I've gone back and forth about this. Obviously, I have the raw data every day. So we did a podcast with Notebook LM Riza, and what's the other person's name? I can't remember his name right now. Sorry. But anyway, so like when people ship AI products, actually it helps to hide the process as much as possible, like not expose the guts, because it really helps you focus everyone on the final output and for you to just iterate on the final output without the constraints of exposing all the bells and whistles. Like one of the successes of Notebook LM, like imagine if they release like 100 different little knobs and tweaks to this from the start instead of the magic like one-click experience, right? And I realized that less is more for a lot of AI products. Yeah, I think that's fair. My push for you on this is I think your audience is like the AI tinkerer, super fan builder who wants those. Like I think that persona wouldn't mind seeing the sort of guts behind the scenes, because like ultimately like we're all learning like what are the different capabilities of the model, as much as that is worth it.
Yeah. Any other things on reasoning? Any takeaways from like DeepSeek? Like, did they get it right? Is Google pursuing a different path? I know there's like not a ton that's public about flash thinking, but like, is DeepSeek the right path? Or they're like, are you seeing multiple paths going on?
Yeah, I think my sort of takeaway from the DeepSeek moment is a few things that we sort of knew, which is, countries that have large investments in the technology sector like can and should build AI models. Like I think it's like not surprising to me that given the position
sovereign AI. Yeah, that
China's in, like they're going to have companies that build great models. Like that seems like a super obvious outcome to me.
I'll interrupt there. I was just talking more about like the technical insights from the paper, right? For example, a big aha moment was no MCTS. Like they tried it, didn't work. No process reward models, tried it, didn't work. And for like most of the past year, we were talking about those things as like the future of reasoning, and it turns out they're not needed at all. I feel like GNOME being able to land it Gemini and ship flash thinking in like 2 months is also a sign of like, this was a head fake originated by Q Star, this magic secret code name that everyone extrapolated based on.
Yeah, I'll let Jack. I'll connect you with Jack and Gnome. You should have them on the podcast to talk about when we do the GA launch, hopefully very soon. I think doing a deep dive with you all would be for flash thinking would be a ton of fun. I don't want to be the one to spill any of the details before then.
Got it. Should we touch on the real time multimodal stuff?
Yeah. I think that'd be super fun.
Something that people often overlook. So I'll give a huge shout out to Paige Bailey, who it also seems like you're forming a proper DevRel team with Paige and with Christina Warren and I forget who else. They all announced on the same day that they were joining Google. Paige, like on the day of Gemini 2 Flash's launch, came over to our New Rips event and demoed it, and it was really incredible.
Yeah, if folks haven't tried this before, aistudio.google.com/live. It's the real-time live experience. And I think it is a front-end experience that's powered by the Multimodal Live API, but really hits on this sort of a couple of broader themes that I think matter a lot. One of them is just like this AI co-presence, which I think we're getting, like one of the big limitations of AI systems being useful is like they don't have the context. Like they can't see what you see. They don't have access to the stuff that you do. And I think the model's actually being able to see and you being able to interact with them using your voice, I think bridges us closer to this world where we're actually not limited by the context because the models can see and do all the same stuff that I'm able to do. But also, I think it's just like, it's one of those experiences that's so fundamentally visual. Like you can show the model what you see on the screen. You can, have it connect to your camera. You can send text to it. You can talk to it. All this stuff, which I think feels like the AI experience, which is really interesting to me. Like it's not just chat; it's truly this like different experience than you get today. And I don't think we've seen a lot. Like there's a couple of products. It's interesting like how much this is in parallel to like the chat app phenomenon. Like everyone, it started off with a couple of chat apps that choose your favorite chat app that was like really good and super popular and widely known, and then that technology sort of broadly assimilated into society and into products and such. And I think we're going to see the same thing with this, like showing that like if every browser in the world doesn't have this experience in the future, I'd be surprised. If every IDE in the future doesn't have the ability to like, here, let me just show the model what's happening here, share my screen, talk to it live, like I think that's going to be a huge miss. So we're going to see more and more of the tools that people use enable AI to show up as a thought partner in like a very multimodal way, which will be super exciting.
Yeah. Do you think chat is just like technical debt in a way? Like we started there and now people are just chatting, but like, when I look at like the Gemini real-time stuff, is like, why would you chat? It doesn't really make sense to me, but I feel like people are kind of stuck in the UX that they started with, and I'm curious what it's going to take to get out of it.
I think there's still a lot of things where chat probably makes a lot of sense. For what it's worth, like I personally find, and maybe this is just my super personal bias, but like I feel like I'm in meetings working, talking all day, and like it's really nice to just like chat with AI sometimes and not have to talk to it. It's like kind of exhausting to always have to talk to the models. And like I think like through that lens, there's going to be a lot of chat experiences. I think the chat experience that I'm most excited about, and like I've been pushing on this for years, and I feel like we still have haven't even gotten there. And it's early sort of nuggets of this product success area working, which is like bringing the chat to the places that you're already chatting, like text, email, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's the place in which I want to use, like the models are already good enough to do that. The interfaces, like text message has multimodal, image, audio. There's like app experiences built into a bunch of the messaging apps. So like you can fully do that experience today. And like, I feel like that's the chat experience that is going to make the most sense in the future. And especially critical to onboarding like the next 3 to 4 billion users. Like, I don't think those people are going to come in through, some front end website somewhere. Like those people are going to come in through audio, from a telephone to texting to email. Like that's just the most obvious outcome.
Why are people not using the Gemini Nano thing more? That was one of the most exciting things for me from Google I/O last year. And thanks again for having us there.
Yeah.
But it seems like, it shipped, right? But I don't really see a lot of adoption yet.
I think it's feature flagged, right? Or I don't know. You can correct us.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure what the deployment is for Gemini Nano.
So I'm pretty close to the browser guys, and it seems like it's still feature flagged for some reason. It's in Chrome Canary. You have to turn it on with the developer flag. You can't just do window.ai and then something. It's not live yet for everybody.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense.
It's a good push. I'll ping some folks and find out what the status is. I don't know if it's hopefully it launches soon. I think in the JavaScript Council, the demos were super incredible that I saw like a few months ago. So I'll be intrigued to see when it lands.
Yeah, to me, this is the promise of sort of the local LLMs. It should be owned by the operating system, which is Apple, and we know the issues with Apple, or the browser, which is Google. And so it's one of the two, really. You probably shouldn't have to download a separate model for every single app that you own. Like every model should just share the same model. Sorry, every app should share the same model. Yeah, one thing I'm curious about, you're talking about like the multimodality. Have you tried Astra? What's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right after I/O, when Astra got announced, I got to spend a bunch of time just like testing out a bunch of use cases. And to me, what's actually astonishing is the multimodal live API can do pretty much most of the Astra experience out of the box. I think there's a couple of...
Is that basically the API for Astra, or is this like a different...
It's technically different. I think Astra was really intended as like a research experiment of like, how do we push like truly the frontier of what's possible in this user / product experience, and like didn't take into account like any of the thus far like practical realities of like, could we ship this thing to millions of people and like have them actually deploy it in their product? So different sort of constraint situation. But I think probably like 80% of that experience you could get out of the box with the multimodal live API. The couple of things that I think we're still working on, and actually we'll hopefully bring those to the API as well, is like one of the big ones is memory. Like the cool thing about Astra is you can sort of show it something or talk to it, and then as you go from session to session, it will actually remember the different contexts between the two sessions. And there's like a bunch of very real constraints to make that happen. And I think a memory service is something that I've been talking to the team a bunch about as far as like building that layer for developers and doing it in a really elegant way that's not just like RAG with embeddings.
How? You have some secret sauce, or you want to?
Yeah, no, I don't want to give the secret sauce because like we have to actually build this and make it work and scale. But like I think the solution has to be something different, and part of the challenge is the scale, but also like the speed at which you get some of this context back. I don't think that like embeddings are going to be able to scale to I think they work well for some of this as like kind of the MVP version of the experience, but I think you're going to need a different experience. And it's probably something like really smart caching with like a bunch of, sparkles mixed in there that is like some of the infrastructure sweet sauce. Like it really feels like this core infrastructure problem that is not solved by the embedding example.
Okay. The one thing I'm fine with that with caching. It basically means you're using full attention on your memory, which is always going to be better than RAG and retrieval and all that. The one problem with that is you can't delete things, and sometimes it's very helpful to delete things.
I think doing it in a way that lets you delete things is the secret sauce.
Okay,
that's the hope, is that you can sort of have that level of control.
That's super exciting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I hope that you publish a paper someday about it, but launch it first, and we'll see. Cool. Anything else? Calls to action, shameless plugs. Anything coming up?
Yeah, I think the only other thing is we're also pushing on a bunch of these like search powered use cases with Gemini. It's one of the things that I think very naturally makes a lot of sense for Google. And we shipped search grounding a few months ago. And then with 2.0, we updated a second generation of this called Search as a Tool. And I think, we're sort of seeing the early versions of this with both deep researches, the Google one and the OpenAI one. But I think there's a huge amount of value to be created with that product experience and enabling developers actually to be the ones to sort of keep pushing in that frontier and building the right versions of that product experience. I'm excited about it and is something that we're pushing on. And you can build like a lot of that experience today with Search as a Tool, but I think there's some more work on our side to make it a lot less frictionful to bring that to life.
Yeah. I think this is a category called online LLMs. Like Perplexity kind of plays in this category. Other people have other search tools, but obviously Google is the best at search. There's not much real question there. Cool. Alessio, anything else?
No, this was great, man. You were episode 1. I think this is episode 118 or something. So great to have you back. And
you have your own podcast? Are you still running that?
I have two podcasts. That's the downside. Is I have a personal podcast and then I have a Google podcast. So
he doubled us.
Okay,
you got two. We got one.
Plug it.
I'm sorry.
What are they?
Yeah, so the personal podcast Around the Prompt, me and my co-host Nolan sit down and really we're trying to frame this as like very lightweight, unfiltered conversations. We actually have an episode with Chamath Palihapitiya going out, I think today, if I put it out on time.
Nice.
CEO of GitHub, Thomas Dorkey, tomorrow. So like lots of great folks and just chatting them about AI and having very casual conversations. And then at Google, I run the Google AI Release Notes podcast. And this is really about sort of how do we peel back the layers of the stuff that's happening inside of Google. And I've had amazing folks like Emmanuel Taropa talking about long context and Flash AB, Tulsi Doshi, who's the product director for Gemini, and then Jack Ray, actually the co-lead for reasoning models. And I just recorded an episode. So hopefully that will be out in the next few days at the time of this recording.
Okay, well, we'll have to catch up on those. I also know that DeepMind started a process with Hannah Fry. We have a small little Hannah Fry fan club because her voice is so great.
The challenge for me is she makes my stuff look so bad that I'm like, I'm glad Hannah's doing this because like she's the real deal. She's a professional.
You just need a British accent.
Truly, there's a lot of people at DeepMind with British accents, so I feel like I need to differentiate in a different way other than a British accent.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back. Thanks for all the awesome work you're doing. Honestly, I'd just love to have you back for World's Fair for this year, but we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. I'm excited. I'll be there. Hopefully, the scheduling will not be horrible like it was for me last year because of it was. I forget we were launching like 5 things or something like that at the same time. It was the GA release or something. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah. But also, I mean, Google came through with like some other presenters, and you also had Kathleen from the Gemma team, and I think people are very excited about open models still. Yeah, there's lots of stuff coming from Google.
I love it. Wonderful to see you both.
All right.
Bye, Logan.
Bye.